Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing the inevitable. Everybody has one. Everyone's got to make one. Got to get them 3 clicks for my channel. So one day I can be make that big Genshin money and be able to, or that big YouTube money and be able to afford a 10 pool. We're going to be doing a tier list. So just quickly, I want to explain a few things obviously off the start. Everybody mentions, all characters are good if you're willing to put in the time to invest them, build around them, etc. So don't take this as absolute gospel. Also, this is from my perspective as someone who is a light spender, doesn't really have access to a lot of 5-star weapons, doesn't have access to 5-star constellations. So that is something to keep in mind, that this could very much change if you're someone who has access, who has the disposable income to be able to roll on a lot of the high constellations for these 5 stars. So it's a brief explanation of the tier. Z, this is our top. This is the best of the best. And then we have standard S plus, S, A, B, C, D. So let's start. Let's see, do we want to go in order of top to bottom or just in character order? Let's just go in character order. That makes more sense. So this is going to be a Nemo Traveler, this is going to be Geotraveler, and this is going to be an Electro Traveler. So, start with a Nemo Traveler. A Nemo Traveler is a C tier unit. Now, part of the reason they are so low is that there are so many good Nemo units already in the game. We have tons of them. But they are still an Nemo unit, and Nemo has one of the best, is one of the best supporting elements in the game, has one of the better artifact sets in the game, especially for supporting allies, so that is something to take into account. They are by no means bad, they are just one of the weaker versions of the Traveler. So Geotraveler is a solid B, is a good battery unit for other Geo characters, has a crit rate buff and can do okay damage, but doesn't really have any kind of strong synergies that would enable it to be a higher ranking unit. Let's go to Electro Traveler. Electro Traveler is also a B, very similar to Geotraveler, decent damage, is able to battery a lot of different units, but unlike Geo, whereas Geo is more of a Geo-specific battery, Electro is a generic battery. So let's go next on our list. We have Albedo. Albedo is a solid S tier unit. He is essentially just one of the best battery units in the game. He's Geo, which helps with Geo resonance. Decent damage, very low investment required. Is overall a very solid support unit. Amber is going to be down here in the C tier. She isn't bad by any means. A lot of people make her sound like she's a lot worse than she actually is. The problem is she is almost entirely single target. Her constellations are hard to get, which is unique for 4 stars. That's kind of the problem that her, Kaya, and Lisa have to a degree, is that their constellations are hard to get. So that's why she's down here in C tier. Also, again, similar to a Nemo Traveler, she's in one of the most competitive elements in the game. There's so many good Pyro characters that she just gets outclassed. We're going to go with Ayaka next. Ayaka is a solid S tier DPS. She is a very good DPS. Cryo gets to abuse the insane passive on the glacial set. Also has insane values on her ultimate ability, which is good, and is a really good cryo applicator. Things that hold her back, she can't really melt, so you can't really get quite as much peak damage as you can on some of the other cryo characters, but still very solid, very good. Definitely an S tier carry. Barbara, B. So she is arguably one of the weaker healers in the game. But, she still does alright. Decent Hydra application. She reduces the cost of charge attacks with her talent ascension. Not the worst. Can hold a thrilling Tales of the Dragon is one of her main, obviously, advantages, is that this is an advantage that most book characters get that'll probably move even the weaker book characters out of C to B, is just the fact that they can be holding a 3-star weapon that everybody has that can give everybody, or give a character on your team an extra 48% attack, I believe it is, on an R5 thrilling. So yeah, that's where she is. Who's next? Oh, Beidou. Beidou is a solid A tier support. Definitely one of the more slept on characters originally. She definitely requires some investment to be a solid unit. Compared to a lot of these other supports that we thought were figured out were good early on in Genshin's life cycle, but her counter's good. She gets a lot of value off constellations. Her C2 especially is one of the strongest constellations in the entire game, including 5-star C6s and stuff like that. It's a ridiculous damage jump for her, but very good unit. Only a couple downsides. Needs a lot of energy, but doesn't really want to build energy recharge. So Bennett, easiest Z tier. Bennett is, in my opinion, the best unit in the entire game. He's a healer. He's a Pyro. For Pyro res, for Melt and Vaporize, he gives a fat attack buff. He's good at low investment. You can even invest into him high and be a DPS. Bennett is insane. Really only needs C1 to reach max potential, basically. He gets a little bit better with some of his layer constellations, but even at C0, he would still be a Z tier unit. But the fact that he essentially hits max power at C1 is huge value. So yeah. Now let's see, we have Chong Yoon. Chong Yoon is a solid, where do I want to put him? Probably B. He's a solid B tier unit. He kind of just, his main problem is obviously he messes with a lot of other characters, because he cryo infuses on his E. But the cooldown reduction that he applies is not a non-factor, and for some comps can be used very well. Is obviously very good in the national team. Is a perfectly serviceable main DPS. Isn't by no means a bad character, but is another one of these characters where the other members of his element just look so good, with the exception of one person we'll get to later. Deluxe. Duke is still, in my opinion, a solid S tier carry. I know recently he's dropped down a little bit in popularity, or a little bit in opinion. People are rating him a lot lower, but he still has tons of damage, still has really good synergy with characters like Chong Yoon, like Jing Chu, can do a good amount of damage, and he's just a solid Pyro carry. Pretty easy to play, has good access to weapons that are easily available. Just very good, but his only thing is he just doesn't do as much damage as the best Pyro, so people tend to think he's a lot worse than he actually is. Diona? Diona is a solid, I would say, probably put her in S2. Shielding, healing, cryo battery, all very good. At her final constellation, gives an EM buff, 200 EM, pretty valuable. Is a very nice healer to have. The only, is arguably the second best healer in the game. Obviously, Ben is the first, but you can make a pretty good argument that her Origin is the second best, depending on what your kind of comps are and stuff. But it's a very solid unit, especially for a 4-star. Next is Fischl. Fischl is a S tier unit. Turret on Oz, can electro, or can be a battery for other characters. Does decent damage. Her C6 enables some crazy shenanigans with electro charge. So just a very good unit. Very solid. Doesn't need refinements, but definitely between her and Beidou are kind of like, I would say, inverses, whereas Fischl is pretty good at lower investments and doesn't necessarily really spike as much with her constellations, even though her C6 is quite good. Beidou gets a lot better with her constellations and high investment, so there's maybe an argument that maybe these two should be either next to each other, or that, a high invested Beidou would go up here and a normal Fischl would drop down to here. Neither this nor that. Next, we're going to be looking at the Coco Goat. Obvious, easy S plus. One of the best DPSs in the entire game. Good AoE on our ultimate. Taunt. Uh, good good AoE on our charge attacks. Just does a ton of damage. Obviously, being cryo has access to a reactive element, a transformative reaction. Sorry, a multiplicative reaction. So can get extra damage from that. Very good, solid unit. Good free to play options. Doesn't really need a lot of constellations. So yeah. Hu Tao, same thing. S plus damage. Very good. Same as Ganyu. Is Pyro, so can reverse melt or can melt or can reverse vaporize. She arguably has her C1 is probably the strongest of most of the 5-star DPSs, or I don't want to say the strongest, but the most noticeable of all the 5-star DPSs. I don't think it's. I've heard it's somewhere in the range of a 14 to 16% damage increase, which isn't as game changing as it sounds, but she's a really strong unit. She's the best Pyro unit. She's basically the unit that has power crept Diluc, more or less, or at least in most people's eyes has power crept Diluc, even though realistically they're very close, but obviously they compete for the same units for supports, so that's why people, tend to think he's been eclipsed. Next is Jean. Jean is a solid, I think probably I think if she wasn't a Nemo, she would be A, but just the fact that she can carry Viridescent makes her an S tier unit. Viridescent is really strong. She has good damage. She's good quick swap. She has healing. Her heals are pretty chunky, and she doesn't actually have to be built for healing. She can just be built for damage and still have healing. She cleanses, which is actually a relatively unique thing among most of the characters, and is pretty valuable depending on situation. So, yeah, just a solid unit. The only thing, between her and Diona is obviously she's a 5-star, and a 5-star that's not on a banner, so much harder to get than Diona is. So that's why I think Diona is a little bit better, but I wouldn't say they're a tier apart. Kaya is a solid A tier unit, arguably the best cryo battery in the game. Very good at generating particles, good consistent application of his element. Is probably one of the more overlooked characters with Beidou. That's probably going to be a theme among the A characters, is that they're relatively overlooked characters. But yeah, very solid, very good. Can actually be a carry in some comps, but realistically is just one of the better electro orb generators and has decent damage while doing it. Now, Kaching. Kaching is probably an A tier unit as well. She was held back super hard by her element. If she was Pyro, Cryo, or Hydro, she'd be here, maybe even competing up here. But cheap burst, good crits, good damage. A lot of fun to play. She's one of my favorite characters personally, but objectively, just being a electro character limits her damage potential compared to some of the other carries. Klee's S tier as well, near Diluc. Now, much harder to play than Diluc. It's very hard to get her optimal damage out, but very similar. Has good access to a lot of team comps. Good damage. Is Pyro, so great there. She does require more work, but if you're willing to put it in the work, she is easily an S tier unit. Lisa is a probably a C tier unit. Actually, no, I'm going to throw her up in B, and I'm going to tell you why. So, the only reason Lisa is a B tier unit and not a C tier unit is the fact that she can be a Thrilling Tales of the Noblesse Oblige, which is, you check Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayer on her, you check Noblesse Oblige on her, and you use her Ascension passive that lets her defense shred, and essentially just use her as a big old damage bonus for some of your allies. So, super niche, not really that great, but whereas these characters kind of require a lot of investment or are just kind of weaker to their counterparts, there is no other electro character really that gives as much that can transfer the DPS bonus of a Thrilling Tales. So realistically, she is one of the better Thrilling Tales holders, if not the best Thrilling Tales holders in the game. Now, Mona. Mona is a... part of me wants to put her in S tier, but I think I'm going to put her in A. I'm going to tell you why. Now, Mona is a part of a lot of these stronger comps in the game. Stuff like Ganyu freeze teams, Ayaka freeze teams. But I think she is kind of more carried by the fact that those characters are so strong and just need a good Hydro applicator and can abuse the Owen buff than her necessarily being a strong unit. Now, she's very good, but just like all these characters here, she does have kind of a semi-weak, not a semi-weakness, but she does have something that kind of holds her back. Outside of her like burst rotation, she doesn't necessarily offer a lot, and you really do have to be doing some shenanigans to get the most value out of her burst. Next is Ningguang. Ningguang is a solid A tier unit. Now, a lot of people probably would have her up here, and I think you definitely could make an argument that she should be up here, but that's only really at C6 with a decent weapon. I think realistically she's down here with a lot of these characters. No, by no means are any of these characters even remotely near bad. But again, kind of held back, like a lot of these other characters, semi-held back by her element. Because she's Geo, she doesn't have anyone else she can react with to get a lot of extra damage. She kind of just gets extra damage from Geo Resonance and any generic Elemental Shred or Geo Elemental Shred that is present. So, for that reason, I put her in A because she can't really abuse a lot of the damage reactions like these other characters can. Noelle. Noelle's an easy... I don't say easy, but I would say she's a C tier unit. I think, in my opinion, she is probably one of the most... She probably is the unit that is least worth your resources, except for maybe one other that is we're going to get to. Maybe two others, but good at C6, but requires C6 and requires you to kind of build around her. And she, for a character that needs constellations really to be good and needs... but is kind of usable at C0, so let's not say she needs constellations, but for a character that needs to be built around so much, the fact that she doesn't necessarily put out the damage to compensate for it, definitely the survivability is there, then no question, self-healing, all that stuff, fantastic, wonderful, great, but the damage really isn't there that, like, even like Amber, if you were to invest this much into Amber as you need to into like Noelle to make a Noelle team good, Amber would just be absolutely slapping by comparison. So Noelle is more of a comfort fun pick, but not really a super competitive unit. Definitely do not try to use her as a healer, please. Like, use Lisa with a prototype with the prototype weapon that gives % healing before you use Noelle. Like, it is that meh. Next is Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi is a C tier unit. Now, I'm gonna tell you why. I'm pretty sure everybody knows, but all she does is heal. And realistically, in Genshin, we don't need a lot of healing. Arguably any, depending on how good you are, but I think most people prefer to run with a healer, and I think, considering the fact that a lot of healers, Jean, Diona, Bennett, have another element besides just healing, they bring something to the table, it's worth running them anyway. Chi-Chi really doesn't. She doesn't apply her element enough to be a reaction character. She doesn't give enough energy to be a cryo battery. The one saving grace I will say is if we ever do get some super, super hard co-op content, find you a whale with a C6 Chi-Chi, because it's the only res in-game currently that works if someone dies in co-op. So that's something to keep an eye on. Next is Razer. Razer is a... I think he's an A tier unit. I think similar to Ningguang, is a 4-star DPS that can get quite a bit of bonus as you get constellations for him. But unlike Ningguang, he has access to a really good free-to-play weapon in game, the Stone Tomb Sars Silver, with a physical damage substat. And unlike her, he can take advantage of some other units. People like Fischl or Rosaria, who'll be coming later. He's a solid DPS. He kind of got power crept by a certain 5-star blue-haired woman, but not really. He's still good. He's probably one of the most underrated, one of the more underrated characters in the game. Um, because obviously a lot of whales aren't going to use him, and a lot of long-term players, if they aren't already invested in Razer, aren't really going to go back and invest in him now. As he is greedy, he requires a lot of resources. But if you're starting now and you start off your account with him, by all means build him. He'll do great things for you. Sucrose, easy S tier unit. Anemo, Veneris of Venerer is insane. EM shares a lot of EM allies, insane. Has okay damage now with the swirl bust that came a little while ago. Great. Constellations are powerful, offer some shred. Very good character. I would say her C1 is, I don't want to say required, but I would recommend it because her elemental skill does have a really long recharge. But yeah, just a solid overall unit. Child is an easy A tier unit. Put him right next to Kaching. This is in my opinion the most overrated unit in the game. He is by no means bad. Do not take that the wrong way. But there are people who are like, oh, he's better than Klee, he's better than Diluc, he's better than, he's up here with Hu Tao and Ganyu. It's a no, not unless you are giga invested into child teams and do not have the other, and are just ignoring the other units existing. He is not Hu Tao Ganyu levels of strong. He's a little clunky with how he works, or not clunky, but he requires a little bit pretty perfect timing, or pretty good timings with all of his teammates. His problem as well is, obviously, he wants teammates other people want too. Like, realistically, there's no reason to give this child your Bennett when you could give your Bennett to any of the DPSs really above him. By no means bad. If you have him, build him. If you like him, he's a lot of fun. He does a lot of interesting things. He's one of the best Hadro on-field applicators in the game. So he definitely is a unit that scales well into the late game, and definitely over time will scale well. These aren't bad units. He's not a bad unit. He's good, but it's just that I just want to make the distinction that I see a lot of people say he's up here, but he is sure as heck not up here. Venti, easy Z tier unit. Spoiler, these are the only two Z tier units in the game. These units are absolutely busted. Crazy what they do. Venti just does so much damage, offers Nemo shred, is good at low investment, is good at high investment, has a good free to play weapon you are given. Arguably his best weapon is a 4-star weapon, the stringless. Just so good. Lots of CC. Even when the CC isn't useful or good, he still just does so much damage. He's such a good unit, and I definitely have seen a little bit of disrespect towards my boy Veni recently. People are putting other units up here with these two. People are, saying, hope he's not as good, knock him down. No. These two are up here, and it's not close. No one is close to these two in power level, okay? Sure, the units, the DPSs or whatever, and the supports that go here are good, but these units are so standout that I personally think they deserve their own tier. I think most people wouldn't argue with Bennett, but I think Venti is one that maybe recently people are like, or a certain character might be missing from this tier later that other people are going to assume is there. Zhangling, solid S tier. Good Pyro DPS. Obviously, Pyro kind of has an advantage, as you can see by most of these characters, because it has access to both both multiplicative reactions. So, her main thing is that she isn't really an on-field carry. So if you need, these characters probably do a little bit more percentage of your overall, but she doesn't require field time. She just requires being batteried. So very good. Hard carries the national team. Probably the most underrated unit from the start of the game till now. I think a lot of us are finally coming around on this character. Her and Beto, very much early on, are like, yeah, they're all right. But now it's like, no, these are some cracked units, especially with some constellations. Like if you get her, I think it's her C4 for the 40% longer Pyronado. Woo! Woo! She slaps. Zhao is S+. He is got arguably some of the best AoE in the entire game of any of the DPSs. The only one in contention is Ganyu. He, unlike these two, though, doesn't require Jing Chu, any other elemental reactions or anything like that. He just does his thing, so that is a value. But just good damage, selfish DPS though, so you need to invest a lot into him to get this point. There are some people that are maybe would put him a tier lower because he doesn't have the reactions, but if you go to most of the theory crafting people, most of the people who run all the numbers and all that stuff, they'll pretty safely tell you that these three are very close in power level. So I think these three basically come stapled together in any tier list. Jing Chu. Jing Chu is an easy S+. Easy. This is basically the reason most Pyro DPSs work. Is because Jing Chu exists. All the Pyro DPSs in the game probably honestly drop a tier if Jing Chu doesn't exist. Because Jing Chu is insane. He implies so much Hydra, gives so much damage, and he's a 4-star, and he doesn't even need his constellations. His constellations are good, don't get me wrong. He's awesome with constellations, but he is just a bonkers unit for a 4-star, similar to how Bennett is, but obviously he doesn't. This is the hardest jump to make, this tier to this tier. This is the hardest jump to make. He doesn't make it, but he is still a very, very powerful unit. You're always better off having him than not having him. He essentially is good for every DPS of the game except Zhao, funnily enough. Jianyan. Jianyan is also a C tier. She's kind of uniquely a support unit for a physical damage dealer, but she has the problem of her element. This is the only time. Pyro is arguably one of the best, if not the best element in the game. It's between Pyro and a Nemo. But this is one of the only characters in the game actually held back by the Pyro element because she's physical. It means she doesn't contribute to either of the electrocharged elements, which means that if you still want that, you need two other characters. So if she was an electro or a cryo unit, she would shoot up a couple tiers at least. But being a Pyro unit, but not only a Pyro unit, but obviously a Pyro unit that does actually apply Pyro while she applies her physical debuff, so she messes with stuff like Superconduct. She just generally isn't worth the build compared to most of the other units. These are the only three units, these three down here, that I think are probably not worth building unless you have no other options. I think even Amber, you could make an argument if you want to use her that she's alright. Same thing with Nemo Traveler. But these three down here are a little worse. They're not D tier, they're not bad, right? It's just that you build these for fun. I put it that way. They could still easily clear a lot of the harder content in the game, but you build these because you like them more so than them good. Now Zhongli, easy S+ tier. Shield is great. Resistance Shred Kid is either really valuable or not super valuable depending on what you have and stuff like that. Like for example, with Zhao, he is a super valuable unit for Zhao specifically because it's hard to get a Nemo Shred on units that aren't really high constellation characters like C4 Gene or I think it's C2 Gene, C4 Venti, or C4 Venti, C2 Gene, something like that. Or like the Nemo Travelers is really annoying to use, doesn't really work well. So very solid unit. I think a lot of people would put him up here. The reason he doesn't go up here, at least in my opinion, is he doesn't actually bring that much damage to your team. I know the shred is nice, but realistically for characters that are not Zhao or Geo or Anemo specifically, or even possibly Electro too, but for any Cryo, Hydro, or any reaction character he messes with his pillar, that's the first thing. So you have to kind of drop the pillar away, and then you can't really run him on a Millilith set to get the bonus. But very strong unit. The best comfy unit in the game, makes the game so much nicer to play from a survivability standpoint. Is really good with a 3-star weapon, which is one of the advantages of Albedo as well. Very good with a 3-star weapon. So that's awesome. Next. So our next unit is Rosaria, who is quite a good unit. I think probably a solid. I want to put her in. I'm kind of tempted between B and A, but I think I want to put her in B. I'm going to tell you why. Now, even though she does give a crit buff, which is awesome, and she does a little bit more damage, especially a little bit more front-loaded damage than Kaya does. Her crit buff isn't always super useful. It takes a lot of investment just to get 7, 8, 9% crit out of this, which is only like, which is at the end of the world. She's good, but it's just that, and she's fun. She's an interesting character, but it's just that as a support, I think Kaya is often better unless you have a specific reason to want the crit rate. Like, this is another thing actually as well, is that most cryo units are probably ran double cryo and are generally in freeze comps. There are a couple exceptions, of course, like Melt Ganyu or the national team with Chong Yoon, but in general, the crit isn't super valuable to other cryo characters for the most part. She does have physical resistance, so she does work well with someone else, but like some of the other units in here, she's more of a specific support for a unit than I would say she's a general overall good cryo unit like Kaya is. She's very similar to Chong Yoon in that respect. Yula Yuli is an easy S tier. Great physical DPS. It does have a little bit of an energy issue, but can be mitigated with good rotation. People like Diona. The queen of damage per screenshot for most people. The only reason she doesn't have the damage to quite roll with these three up here, so that's why she's down here. Has a good free-to-play weapon, though, in the Snow Tomb Star Silver. Artifacts are good artifact sets. This is generally nice, solid damage character, but is a little greedy and doesn't and is a little bit more restrictive than someone like Zhao is, who is greedy. Whereas Zhao is greedy, but really only cares about having enough energy. So besides Zhao, you can kind of fill the team with anybody as long as they give him energy and a little bit of healing. Yula kind of specifically does want a cryo battery plus a realistically a shielder because she needs to auto attack a lot and is in danger a lot, and also someone to be able to superconduct, so an Electro unit as well. So she is quite limiting in her team builds. Definitely a very good character, though. Don't just because she's below someone else, don't think she's bad. She's still a very good character. Next is Yanfei. Yanfei is A. She's very similar to Ningguang, if not maybe slightly better than Ningguang because she is Pyro. So she gets to abuse Jing Chu basically. But again, like Ningguang, kind of locked behind constellations, and like kind of has the problem of needing to compete with the other members of her element. Like if she was the best Pyro 4-star DPS, she'd probably be up here. But Zhangling exists, so Zhangling is kind of the de facto Pyro DPS for people that don't have any of the 5-star Pyros. Or don't have these 5-star Pyros that are on the list. We'll get to that. Next is Causewa. Causewa is an easy S+. He is huge damage bonus for a lot of characters. He has decent crowd control. His own damage is not too bad. It's actually quite good. But the main thing with him, obviously, is just you play him to get the damage bonus, which enables a lot of mono-element teams, or even non-mono-element teams, but just to really boost a specific character, like, say, boosting the pyro damage in a national team, so Zhangling can vape even harder off Jing Chu. The reason he isn't up here with Venti is just that he requires a lot more investment than Venti, whereas Venti is good, like, basically level 60 with a crappy set. To really get value out of Causewa, you basically need him maxed, level 90 weapon, good artifacts, and even then he's still only barely competing with Venti, so that's why, in my opinion, a tier below Venti. Alright, we're almost done here. Yoimiya next. Yoimiya is an A tier unit, so she isn't. The reason she's A and not S is because she doesn't really abuse Vaporize as much. So she ends up not being able to take advantage of units like Jing Chu as well as these two do. Although she does have some good teams, and she's by no means a bad character. She just she's Pyro, and Pyro is unlike a Nemo, where Nemos are normally support units. So like realistically, you have two of them on an account, and some of them also have other roles like Causewa being a damage buffer, Sucrose being an EM buffer, Jean being a healer, and Zhao being a main DPS. There are just 5 units that are all just Pyro main DPSs, so it's a lot more competitive to be a good Pyro main DPS, and she just, of the 5 stars, she definitely is the worst. But she's by no means bad. If you like her, build her. If you have her, great. Enjoy her. And she definitely can get you through a lot of the content in the game, no problem whatsoever. And she definitely can do super well in Abyss. Just look into building her more towards an overload style. Next is Sayu. Sayu is in my opinion, a solid A tier unit. I think maybe a couple other people have her rated higher. I admit I could be completely wrong here, but she has Viridescent, good healing, and can kind of roll around to get some energy, but doesn't really have the damage support that someone like Jean has, whereas Jean does do less healing than her. She drops a turret, which does damage sometimes, and healing. I think there's a constellation that gets rid of that, similar to Bennett's. But Jean just kind of does more damage, in my opinion, and it's more focused damage as well. Also having the cleanse, also arguably with her rolling mechanics, she requires a little bit more field time than someone like Jean does. And again, similar to Yoimiya, she's an emo, and like I said, we got an emo characters we got to compete with. Even though I just got finished saying an emo is a little bit less competitive, she kind of fits the same role Jean does, but also being a healer, she has to compete with Diona as well, who is in most cases just better, because she gives a shield as well. But yeah, so Rayden Shogun. Do I want to put her where I want her to be, or do I put her where I think she is? So I'm going to cheat a little bit, alright? This might be a little bit copium because I really like this character. But I'm going to put her in S+. I'm going to tell you why. It's because she is very good at generating particles and increasing damages for her allies' burst, as well as having a pretty strong burst herself. Has a very good free-to-play option in game with the catch. And is going to be very strong for any units or comps going forward with high energy costs that she can abuse. Now, this might be a little copium. She might actually belong. I don't think she's like worse than like S, to be honest with you. Like, she's a really good unit, but I think she definitely has a lot of potential. She feels good. Maybe she's semi-limited on her comps right now, but I think definitely over time we're to find just that she's going to be a good unit, especially if they fix her interaction with Beto. If they fix her interaction with Beto, like 100% here. Even if they don't, probably still belongs here, but is definitely the weaker of the S+ tiers. Kujusara, I'll put her in A tier. Now, I think you could make an argument that she should be higher because she has an attack buff like Bennett, but unlike Bennett, she isn't the right element. She doesn't enable a multiplicative element like Bennett does. Bennett also having to be being half of the best resonance in the game. So her not. And also, she really does want her C2 to be good, and her C6 is very strong and is very strong for other Electro characters, but the problem is it's strong for other Electro characters, which Electro is probably one of the weaker, if not the weakest element in the game currently, so not necessarily the best, but still, very good unit. Attack buffs are great, insane, good value. A little constellation heavy, doesn't heal like Bennett, doesn't cleanse like Bennett, but it can do a little bit more damage. Solid A tier unit. Now, I'm a PC player, so I haven't really gotten my hands on to mess around or see Alloy, and obviously these two aren't out yet at the time of this video, so I think this is we're going to take another look at the list and see if there's anybody that needs to go up or down. I think there's maybe an argument you can make that Rosaria belongs either at the top of B or like in A. I think I want to put her in A because I think she is a little bit better than Chong Yoon. She's not quite as niche as some of these characters down here are. But I do still think that Kaya tends to be better in a lot of situations. Is there anybody else that probably needs to be moved? Not really. I do believe Rayden is gonna get a lot better, and I do believe like part of the reason people are upset are because they're comparing her to Venti, which is obviously like you should never compare characters to these two because these two are the best characters in the game and are just god tier, and she's not quite as strong as Zhongli post buff, but I think people kind of overrate survivability because like with good gameplay, all Zhongli really brings is an ability to dodge some damage that maybe you would miss every once in a while and some shred. So I definitely think she's a very solid unit, very good support. Let's see, any other units I want to move? No, I think this is good. So just to reiterate real quick, this is a Nemo Traveler down here in C. This is Geotraveler, and this is Traveler. So if you're curious, that's where I think the different travelers are. But I want to thank you for watching. If you have any suggestions or any characters you think should be up or down, let me know in the comments. But I hope you come out to the stream sometimes, and thanks for watching.